Chapter 1, Introduction into American Government and Politics in a Racially Divided World, from the textbook by McLean and Tauber. So in this introductory chapter, the authors really present the principles of our government. What is government? What is it supposed to do? How does it function? And what are the key philosophical traditions that inform the institutions of our government? So what is democracy? What is direct democracy, indirect or a representative form of democracy? Where do they come from? How is it set up on a constitution? And what is a constitutional democracy? And what are some of the characteristics of constitutional democracies and the key principles that undergird these? The rule of law, law, and natural rights. These are the three key principles that undergird our type of democracy. And one thing I really wanted to illustrate in this very brief overview is these three principal traditions taken from classical liberalism, classical republicanism, and inegalitarianism. And traditionally, when we study political science and we study the origins of American government, we are focused primarily on the first two, classical liberalism and classical republicanism. But in order to provide a more broaden our understanding and really lay bare the origins of inequality in systems of government, in our system of government, is the concept of inegalitarianism, which is the tradition of exclusion. So what are the foundations of classical liberalism? And here you have it pretty well laid out, but I wanted to point out who the two principal theorists are, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. And John Locke would be the key philosopher that really holds together, that really drove the impetus to construct our form of government overall. So the social contract is what binds us. And as we've been reading, I'll be expanding on that in the subsequent overview of Chapter 2. So these are the characteristics of liberalism. It's an optimistic view. It's about the individual, the free market, and reason before faith. And what does this last part, reason before faith, means? It means that we are humans. As humans, we are capable of reasoning and no longer reliant on the dictates of any form of religion. And this sort of also structures our Constitution, the separation of church and state. That's one example. Classical republicanism, our second idea, where does it come from? This is where we get our representative form of government. It comes from the ideas of Harrington, Montesquieu, the idea of civic virtue, but yet the people are sort of not detached, but are separated from direct rule. It's a distribution of power. And inegalitarianism. So who gets to participate? Who gets to participate? Well, we could see these three principles of liberalism, republicanism, and inegalitarianism as the three seeds that were planted and gave forth the fruit that we are sort of existent today. So this tradition of excluding large segments of the American population. And how was this determined? By ascriptive traits, largely in terms of race, gender, and religion, and class. And here is a table 1.1, where you can really review this and break down what all those things mean and how they function. But when we're examining this, one thing, when we're understanding the history, we're trying to make sense of our present. And that's the key takeaway from this Introduction to American Government political science course, is you want to understand how this relates to you. And as we're moving through and moving on to Chapter 2, and this tradition of exclusion, one thing, and here's another good chart really laying out that founding moment, who we the people are. And this is what I want to leave us with on this overview. We the people, in the preamble to the Constitution, who were the people, who have been the people, and who are the people today. Because when we ask ourselves, we're all given this idea that we, the people of the United States of America, are to hold certain rights, liberties, freedoms, protections. Who are the people? Are we the people? Are you the people? Who is the people, so to speak? Because once we resolve the question, we really begin to think about who is deserving of full rights and protections, and maybe who has limits to their full rights and protections, and maybe who has very limited rights and protections. So we the people is a key question as you're reading this chapter, as you've read this chapter, moving on to chapter 2 and all subsequent chapters. These three words in quotes up here, we the people, is going to carry us in framing every single chapter. So I will leave us with that, and we move on to this one key piece of legislation that I want to point to, what sort of sets the tone on U.S. citizenship, and to carry the thread of who we the people are. It was made very clear who the people were then, and that is here in the Naturalization Act of 1790. It specified who the people were to participate in U.S. citizenship, and this nascent form of democracy that was incipient in 1789, going into the early 19th century. And how has that expanded over time? Those are the key questions.